All right. So I'm recording also. I'll open, then I'll kick it to you, Kevin, and then you introduce, and then as usual, we go from there.
Okay. And ma'am, I just got to say, I am absolutely terrible at introductions. Um, just because I don't want to take away from what someone might say about themselves. So I typically just say, hey, who this person is to me or to me and Tyree, and then what their name is, and then let you say the rest.
That's fine, because that's what I kind of feel like. Either somebody knows the bio or I'll talk about it.
Right.
All right,
Okay. Yeah, whenever you're.
All right. Couple seconds silence. 3, 2, 1, go. Hey everybody, Tyree here with Before I Forget, along with the best host in the history of hosts, Mr. Kevin. Say hey, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
When I was researching what we're going to be discussing today,
every day it changes. I'm gonna try to get it right one of these times.
It's still really loud.
Really?
Yeah, man. You just suck with the music thing. We'll have to figure that later on. Hey, everybody, listen up. So, Kevin here. Today, on Before I Forget, we have a really amazing guest. I'm happy that she was able to come on. She is very important to me in my life because she is my commanding general in the 95th Division, Brigadier General Susie Kuilan. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hello.
Hey. So, ma'am.
I didn't know he was turning it over to me. I didn't know he was turning it over to me
so quickly. We've rolled the punches. A lot of crazy stuff going on here. I just try to get myself.
Like I said, ma'am, I am terrible with introductions. So who you are and your name, and you can say the rest.
Right. So I am Brigadier General Susie Kuilan. I have been the commanding general of the 95th Division for a little over 2 years. The 95th Division, Iron Men of Metz, Victory Division. My call sign is Iron Man 6, which I'm very, very proud of. Our division is a very storied division that goes back to World War II. We can talk about that later if you want. I've been in the military for 34 years. I live in Northwest Arkansas, just outside of Bentonville, Arkansas, with my husband, and our 3 furry animals and our 3 adult children live nearby. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'd read somewhere that you said that your dogs rule the house.
They do. Of course they do.
Of course, yeah, mine do as well. Max, you wearing my Lift Heavy Pet Dog shirt today, ma'am? Just so.
Yeah.
What kind of dogs do you have?
I have a Catahoula, which is the state dog of Louisiana. It's a hog dog. They're hunting dogs. We don't want to discuss how big he is since he's currently in an IHG hotel. Whoops. And then I have another Catahoula. And then again, because I'm in an IHG hotel, we won't discuss that I have a third dog who is a Aussie mix, and she is a little terrorist. She's also very, very precious when she's asleep.
All right. Well, we'll cut all that stuff out. We'll edit that out of the show, right, Kevin?
No, we're not editing anything out.
No, it's okay. If IHG listens to this podcast, I'll be checked out by then.
Yeah, right. They'll come track you down, man, and be like, you owe us X amount of dollars.
Yeah, I actually didn't know those were the rules until after I had checked in. It was like a little late, so
yeah.
Anyway.
They gotta post them.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that Aussie mix. So I've got a Belgian Malinois, so very similar to. I'm assuming the Australian Shepherd, right? Is that what yours is?
The Aussie Australian Shepherd. Yeah.
They are terrorists. Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Fortunately,
precious.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Fortunately, mine's being precious in the hallway right now, just passed out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you have been in the Army. You commissioned in 1989, right?
Mm-hmm. OCS.
Served a little bit of time on active duty,
Mm-hmm.
and then came into the reserves and had various positions in the reserves. I do want to mention that you have a Catahoula, and you mentioned the Louisiana State dog. Is because you have got a couple of degrees from down there, right?
do. I got my master's degree from Northwestern State University in Natchitoches, Louisiana. And so you can tell I lived in Louisiana a long time because number one, because I pronounce Louisiana instead of Louisiana. And number two, I know how to pronounce Natchitoches.
Never even heard of that.
It's spelled Natchitoches. It's the brother city for it is Nacogdoches, Texas. So legend goes back, it was two brothers. So anyway, and then yes, I got my PhD at LSU in Baton Rouge. So I've spent a lot of time in Louisiana. So
and now, so are you an Arkansas native?
Yes, mostly. I grew up in South Arkansas. I consider it home. I'm definitely a Razorback. I mean, I didn't go to school there, but in Arkansas, you don't have to go to school there to be a Razorback fan, right? Go Hogs! They did win last night. And moving
barely. On. Did you watch that game, ma'am? Oh my gosh!
I did not get to watch any of that because I was with my PAO at a PAO dinner. Anyway, but my husband was texting me throughout the whole thing. But yeah, I grew up in South Arkansas, currently live in Northwest Arkansas, but I actually was born in Germany and moved over here when I was 4, almost 5. I wasn't an American citizen until I was 15 years old.
Oh, wow.
I actually did not know that.
Yeah. So I can't be president.
Well, you can be governor, though.
I think so. I'll be honest, I haven't checked the Arkansas Constitution, but
I guess it would be state by state. I was just thinking because Arnold was governor of California.
Right. Yeah.
Anything fine in California though, so it's okay.
That's true. That's true. Do you know where in Germany you were born, ma'am?
Yeah, I was born in Nuremberg.
Okay.
Both of my parents were German, but divorced shortly after I was born, and then my mother married an American GI. And when he got out of the Army, moved over here. He adopted me. He's my dad. As a matter of fact, we literally forget that we're not blood. I mean, like literally forget. There's been some amusing situations because we forget we're not blood.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's quite funny.
So I was going to ask, okay, so you came in the Army in 1989. And I don't remember the exact year that the Women's Army Corps was dissolved and women were fully integrated into the Army, but I know it was in the late 70s. My stepmom, she served in the Women's Army Corps. And I always thought that was like the neatest thing because I was like, you were in the WAC long, like before, it was or like towards the end, I suppose. And so here you are, you commissioned into the Army in 1989 within, I would say, probably 10 years from the WAC or the women being integrated and the WAC done away with. What does that mean to you as a woman serving?
So I'm a big proponent of recognizing and giving recognition to the history, right? To the people who came before us. And you're right. And I should know this history better myself, right? I think it was 1980. I think that might have been the initial class into West Point. I also know because I've talked to some of them just how very tough it was for them. Whereas I don't often feel like I had it that tough. I definitely don't feel like, and don't get me wrong, I know there's some differences because I am a female in the military, and I know there's some things that don't always go the way they should because I'm a female, and we can talk about some of that. Some of it's amusing, some of it not so. But at the same time, I don't feel like I had it nearly as tough as those early pioneers, both the WAC and the early ones in the regular Army who had integrated in. So, because I feel like they had already paved most of the way or much of the way by the time I came in.
Yeah. So I was reading earlier that women, and I can't remember who the president was. 1948 was when it was signed in the Women's Integration Act, and then fully integrated. I believe it was 1980 is what it sounds familiar. But when we recorded with Major Sidney Jacks, and like she was the 18th female to get her Ranger tab, and the second female into Ranger Regiment, and the first female to get her Ranger Scroll and Ranger tab. or to have both. And some of the backlash that she receives, having served in that particular type of unit with those accolades, like she receives a lot of hate. So I can only imagine how women back then in the 80s, during the super masculine macho times, with the kind of flack they would have caught. So but still, I mean, with 10 years, I mean, women were integrated into combat arms about, what was it, 10 years ago? Going on 10 years? Not even that long?
Mm-mm.
Not even that
No,
long.
in 2016, I was still participating in an OPT. Please don't ask me what that stands for. I always forget. But one of those kind of working groups to talk about it. And there was only some pilot going on in 2016. So it was, I mean, that's only 7 years. So,
Okay.
and that still wasn't full integration by then. So, we're
Right.
still getting there. And I guess until we quit counting, the 8th, the 18th, the 1st, because I'm the first female commanding general of the 95th Division. Until we quit counting, then is when it becomes commonplace, right? And then it's not so much of a big deal as when we quit counting. But as long as we're still counting, then there's still things out there. I will also tell you that for my own self, a lot of times I just bully my way through the China shop, right? So I don't let people knock me down or let me be the China piece. I end up being the bull because I'm not going to put up with some of that. And then I've never been in a situation like some of those women where I've been the only one there. I may have been like, one of 5. I mean, not one of 5, like 5 of 60 or 3 of 12, things like that. But I've never been the only one. And I can only imagine how tough it is when you are the only one, right? Or even one of 2. I've never been in that situation. And then you put the bullhorns on me, and I am Taurus. You put the bullhorns on me, then, I don't tend to notice some of those things because I just don't let them happen to me.
That's excellent. What are some of the examples of times where you had to put the bullhorns on? Let's hear it.
So I won't necessarily say I've put the bullhorns on, but I just don't let them bother me so much as, they're very noticeable, right?
Mhm.
So I started noticing that people would acknowledge, okay, when we're in the military, one of the first things we're taught is rank. And then the second thing we're taught is how to stand or walk when you're with somebody of a higher rank. So anyone to my left should always be of a lesser rank, right?
Right.
So even if you can't see my rank, and I get it, sometimes they say it's hard to see the rank. You could always look at my hat instead of here, but even if it's difficult to see, if they're standing over here to my left, they should not be a superior rank. Well, I started noticing that I would be out and about with a male, typically one a little bigger than me, which is not difficult. And people would acknowledge the male and not me. And I'm like, what the heck? And I mean, at one point, I was even with a sergeant major, right? So it wasn't even 2 officers, it was a sergeant major, and they acknowledged the sergeant major rather than me. So for a while, I thought, well, maybe it's a size thing. Well, do you guys know or remember General Cook was Colonel Chris Cook, 1st Brigade? You're in 3rd Brigade, so maybe not. But anyway, he was the 1st brigade commander. He was a colonel at the time. And he is not much bigger than me. Sorry, Chris, you're not. And we were walking down the sidewalk of my building, the building I'm the commander of, 20 people coming up the sidewalk, all spaced out. And every one of them saluted him. Every one of them.
Huh.
And I pointed it out to him, and he's like, oh my gosh, you've been trying to tell me this, and I didn't believe it. He said, never mind, I believe it. And, so that was an instance where I think I was not acknowledged because I was a female. They just could not have, they just couldn't fathom. They saw Colonel and couldn't fathom that I would outrank him, right? But because I am that kind of that bull, I don't care. I just kind of let it wash over. Now, that being said, I do expect, and they do, when I'm with the NCOs, they shut that down, they correct it right away. But the other way I'm the bull is I just don't let them do it. If I even see it coming, I plow it over, right? And don't let it happen.
So that actually reminds me of a friend of mine, Barbara. She actually used to be in our unit as a drill sergeant a while back. And she was telling me a story about how she and her husband were out at some place, I don't know, it was a restaurant or whatever it was. And her husband had asked if they had a military discount. He didn't serve, but she's a veteran, right? And they said, "Oh, yeah, absolutely, sir. And thank you for your service." And, and she's standing there. I mean, obviously, like male, female, right? But like, and he's the one that asked.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or maybe she asked and they said it to him. I can't remember how it went, but either
Right.
way, she wasn't acknowledged in this. And it is a really interesting thing to like, just people in general don't typically acknowledge females as being soldiers or Marines or veterans in general. Like it's just for some reason, it's still so uncommon or so hard to think of women can serve in these roles too. And now, I mean, like, so like we talked about 2016, women were beginning to integrate into these combat arms roles. And to say like I know a female drill sergeant. I was at the U.S Best Warrior competition with her, and she's an 11 Bravo. She had reclassed into 11 Bravo, and at first I was like, wow, I've never met an 11 Bravo female drill sergeant before. And she was the first person that I met, but like after a while, like talking to her, I'm like, you're just a normal person, and it's not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? And I think you're right. And it is an interesting perspective to say that like the day we stop counting, the day we stop acknowledging you're the first, the 15th, the 31st, or whatever. Not to say that it's not important for women to serve in these roles, but to just to kind of show that like this is normal.
That's right. That we're no longer unicorns, right? Now, as long as we are unicorns, I think we have to keep acknowledging that. And we have to celebrate that. And, just like the Women's History Month, because we are still unicorns and in many respects, right? But yeah, and by the way, I have a similar situation. My husband is not military, but he carries a camouflage backpack. So when we travel, a lot of times they'll say something to him, but he's very quick about, nope, it would be her. So
for calling them out, like it's really unfortunate. It's not just in the military. I mean, clearly, in society, women just aren't taken as equals to men, and it's really
right.
lame because people like you, people like Sydney Jacks, people like any other woman in any other position of power can clearly do the job. People need to get over that old 1930s and 40s and 50s
Yep.
mentality. Like this is 2023 now. We're a new country.
Yes. So I actually, I'm a teacher by trade, English teacher. And I used to do a exercise with pronouns, and I'd leave the pronouns out and say something about a doctor and a nurse, and count how many people put he for doctor and she for nurse. So yeah, well, it's still there.
That's interesting. That's kind of would that fall under psychology or sociology? I mean, that's an interesting study because yeah, there is this association that doctor is a male and the nurses are females.
Right.
That's pretty well. My stepmom was a nurse for 25 years, 26 years, something like that. She retired during COVID and then got tired of being at home with my dad and went back to work. But so like growing up, like that's who I like, and I would like to say that I think of nurses as women because my mom was one, but at the same time, I think you're right. Like I probably would have thought that anyway, because anytime I would go visit her at the hospital, there was a lot of women there, but there were male nurses as well. I had a buddy of mine who I used to work with at an armored truck service, and he went to school for nursing. And I was like, really? I don't know why my mind was blown, but it is really interesting that we have these associations.
Or a male elementary school teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here in California, that's everything's different. We have tons of male teachers in that particular capacity.
And we need them, right? the young kids need those role models, right? And they need to know that it's okay for a male to be a teacher, a male to be a nurse, and so we need those role models, those good role models on from all perspectives. So
when I think on the flip side to that though, ma'am, so okay, for sure, like we need to stop counting all of the, say identifying women as like this is the first one or whatever, and just say like this is the norm. But in the meantime, while we have these unicorns, do you think that women in those positions, these unicorns, like for you example, like you said the first commanding general of the 95th Division, so obviously, like, are you being looked at, or women in these positions being looked at a little bit more, a little harder under the microscope?
Whether we are or not, I think most of us perceive we are, right? And I feel like that in many instances, we feel like we have to be better, that we have to do better. We have to perform better. We have to be stronger. We have to prove ourselves more. And maybe that's not all women, but I know in many instances, that's the way I've kind of felt, that I have to, I have to make sure that I'm more above the standard, that I, that there are some lines that maybe a male could cross that I would never think of crossing, and and it's perception, right? But I mean, we all know, and you as drill sergeants definitely know that the perception is reality, and we have to accept that. So absolutely, whether I'm right or not, it doesn't matter. It's the way I feel like I have to perform. So
absolutely. And I kind of think, I believe that like if everybody kind of performed like they were under the microscope, man, imagine how well everything
much better we would be, right?
Right. But I do see that with a lot of female drills when they're on the trail, and speaking with them, a lot of them feel that like they have to perform, they have to outperform us, or they have to do better, run faster, be harder, be up all day long, much longer than we are. And at the end of the day, from my perspective anyway, and I've been in the unit for a while, from my perspective, I just want to work with drill sergeants that want to do the job, like genuinely want to. I don't care what gender you are. I just want you to train, lead, mentor troops, right, to the best of your ability.
And wouldn't life be great if everybody had that attitude, right? That it didn't matter, what your gender is, what your race is, what your sexual orientation is, it doesn't matter, as long as you are doing the job that you have signed up to do, and do it to the best of your ability. I mean, and it doesn't matter, drill sergeant, right? Just whatever in life, if we all just did what we were supposed to do, how grand life would be.
Mm-hmm.
So we can solve all the world's problems.
What would you say, because it's a common thing that we hear when we post information about anything, there's always a critic, and
a troll.
What would you say to these trolls? Like, hey, I'm a person who can do the job just as good as everyone else, if not better. Why am I getting the special treatment here? Why am I getting the extra scrutiny?
Yeah. So I would tell you, if it's on the 95th page, I'll let my PAO answer it. Although we did have what we thought was a troll not too long ago. And so we kind of brainstormed ways to answer it, and turned out, no, they were just kind of being genuine. It just kind of came across as wrong. It would depend, to be honest. If it's on my personal page, I'm gonna answer it and go after them. But I'm just acknowledge the fact that they're mean, demeaning people who have to build other people up in order to make themselves feel better. But yeah, I mean, if it's on my official page, my PAO is going to answer it and be a little nicer than I would be.
So with the times changing with technology and things like that, people can actually flat out reach out to your POA and say some funky stuff.
Yep. And we're not allowed to take it down.
You can't?
No.
Did not
it's
know
an
that.
official, it's an official page. So we're not allowed to, it's a matter, if you've ever been on any of the, very senior leadership in the military, you'll see, or any of the government pages, you'll see some really nasty stuff out there, and you wonder to yourself, why did they leave it there? It's because we're not allowed to take it down. FOIA rules, transparency. I can't answer it all. Captain Swaim could probably tell you more, but we acknowledge those that we feel like we need to acknowledge because we can't let them slide, and then trolls, they just let them slide. Most people can tell when they're trolls, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. I didn't know that though. But it makes sense. I mean, as far as, I mean, with like transparency as well. You do see it a lot on like the president's social media for sure.
Yeah.
Governors. But the places where I typically don't see it, like I follow the 95th on both Facebook and Instagram, and I really haven't seen a ton of negative comments. I follow a few other like the 173rd Brigade Commander, Colonel Klepper, over in Italy. I follow his Instagram, and it's just nothing but positive stuff. And what I've noticed is if you do a good job and you genuinely care about the troops in your command, you don't get a lot of like negative feedback. It's
Right.
kind of crazy how that works. Like if you do a good job, you get positive feedback.
Right.
Wild.
I'm not going to sit here and say that everybody, all 2,000 plus people in the division, think I'm doing a great job. I'm sure they're not. I mean, that there's people out there who don't think I'm doing a great job, but I would like to say that I think that overall we as a leadership team, because I'm not just a single person, right? I mean, I am a single person, sorry, an individual, but I have a team. And I feel like we do a good job of taking care of the soldiers, taking care of the mission. And I think that shows, right? And not just because we don't have trolls, but I think it shows in the things that we post on social media, right? So.
Well, and that's one thing that I really, and I had spoken with Captain Flame about this too. You're probably the most personable general I've ever met. You're approachable, right? And I feel like any soldier at any level in the 95th or outside of the 95th, if they had a question, a concern, a whatever, and they see you at a public event, obviously like probably shouldn't reach out to your commanding general directly, whatever, but whatever.
Oh, they do.
yeah. There are a lot of troops out there that seem to forget that we have chain of command. But if it is something that like I really need the voice of this person, then you're that approachable. And that's one thing that I actually have really appreciated about you, is because I've met you at several events in Wisconsin, Oklahoma, a lot in Oklahoma, actually.
At the troop holding area.
Right, exactly. And every time you are that approachable. I mean, I know you're a busy person, and you're kind of in and out when you are at training events and various other things. But like, what was it, the 95th Best Warrior competition a couple years ago? Myself and First Sergeant Sawyer took a picture with you, and you had your mask that had the mustache on it.
Hey, by the way, I want a copy of that picture.
I've got it, ma'am. I'll forward it.
Okay. All right, forward that to Captain Swaim.
I will. But that's one thing that I really appreciate about you. And now, is that by design? Is that by intent, or is that just naturally how you are? Yeah,
that's just me. And I will tell you, I have always been me. And now, don't get me wrong, I knew from a very young age in the military that I wanted to be a general, right? I mean, it's like wanting to be a doctor or whatever. You kind of know where you want to go. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I took jobs, I took care of my career and things like that, but I was never going to change me based on whatever I wanted to do, right? And when I was a captain one time, I had my major tell me, because we were joking around about something, and I don't remember what I did, but he told me, he said, "You are the most irreverent officer I have ever been around." And I said, "Yeah, but I'm not disrespectful." He's like, "No, you're not, but you're just irreverent." And I'm like, "Well, what am I supposed to do? Bow down to you and worship at your feet. And he said, see, it's that attitude. You're just irreverent. And, you know, so I'm just me. What you see with me is what you get.
Yeah. I think
what you get. That's cool. And I think that's the name. That's going to be the name of this episode. Irreverent. Just leave it.
No, and I actually, so it's to me, you come off, you absolutely come off as an officer, as a general, but you also come off as a person,
Right.
And well, I mean, you know, you meet those people in the military who are just very like they're just very just one thing and that's it.
And I wonder, they drive me up the wall too. Don't get, I mean, they do. So
yeah. Well, and so I'm wondering, so do you think that there's so we're in the reserves and have been, well, I've been reserved for most of my career. I think you've been reserved for most of your career. Do you think that plays a role in that as well? Or again, like, is that just part of who you are?
Reserve culture?
Yeah.
Huh?
Like
Well, I don't know that. I mean, but that's a good question. I haven't thought about that because, you know, is it because I'm in the reserve, so therefore we have split personalities, right? Because we have our, you know, twice the citizen, soldier, you know, but at the same time, I was this way, you know, I did an active duty tour as a colonel, a 2-year active duty tour as a colonel, and then I did a deployment as a major. You know, I was still like this. That was still me. But again, by that time I had quite a bit of reserve time behind me. You know, would I be this, and I don't want to use the term loose, but would I be this casual? Maybe that's the term. If I had a 34-year active duty career, I don't know. That's interesting to thing to maybe look into or study. I don't know how you would study that, but you know, I don't know.
I think it's one thing that I've kind of noticed. Anytime I go on orders, and I'm working with my active duty counterparts, the way I interact with troops and other people versus how they interact with troops and other people, it is different. And so I'm inclined to believe that it's what Tyree called like reserve culture, where we have that switch, because outside of the military, you are a dean, assistant dean.
I was an associate dean. I just got laid off.
Oh, what?
That's all right.
Geez, sorry to bring that up, ma'am. Didn't know.
No, that's actually, it's okay. As I told somebody the other day, I was an associate dean for a for-profit university that obviously wasn't very profitable.
But with that being the case, though, I mean, here you are on the civilian side, having to speak to people like a normal person, you know, staying away from military terms and being able to like have empathy and speak to them as opposed to how we sometimes do in the military, and you know, it comes off as speaking down, or like speaking from one rank to another rank. And I think that's, I mean, from my perspective, or from my experience anyway, I guess when I was active duty, that was the life. When I came into the reserves, it was a huge transition for me. I was, you know, we were active. Tyree and I were active for 4 years. I was IRR for a year, and then came into the reserves, into the 95th. And you know, I still had this like active duty mentality. And I'm working in a company where like guys have been in the unit for a few years. And for me now, I've been in the unit for, I'm doing math in public now. I don't know, 16, 18 years. And you know, like First Sergeant Sorry, for example, he was my supervisor at ECS, right? So at work, he was Derek, you know, and in my personal life, he's a good friend of mine because we were drill sergeants together, you know. So like you
now
have
he's first sergeant, so
right, and you have to play that game, right? To say like, when I'm in uniform, he is first sergeant, and what first sergeant says. When I see him outside of work or uniform, and at work, now he's a super. I don't work there anymore. I work for the VA now. But now if I see him outside of uniform and work, you know, he's just first name basis, and it's just this really interesting dynamic that we have in the reserves.
So when I first got in the reserve, one of the units that I was in Utah, there was a major and an E8, and if I remember correctly, on the civilian side, the E8 was the superintendent of schools, and the major was one of the either principals or teachers, or maybe the E8 was a principal and the major was a teacher. Bottom line, the supervisory role was exactly reversed, right? So yeah, I mean, you get some of that, right? You also get, I won't call it fraternization because it's not, but you definitely have more relationships that cross ranks, I think, in the reserve, because so much of it is based on their knowledge of them in as civilians, not within the reserve. So, and as long as it doesn't violate good order and discipline in a unit, what does it matter, right? And I think that's the thing that kind of separates us from the active duty, is because there is no knowledge outside of the military for an active duty person, right? Or very seldom would there be knowledge outside of the workplace.
Right. Yeah, I've often believed that. So Tyree and I deployed to Iraq on active duty in 2004. We were infantry. And I've thought about it so many times since then, and this is just one of the ways. Like I was a hater of the reserves, obviously, as people on active duty are, until I experienced it. And once I experienced it, I learned a ton about the benefits that being in a reserve unit has. Like when you're mobilized, when you're deployed. For example, a medic in the National Guard and Army Reserves is likely an EMT or works in the ER, has dealt with trauma on a constant daily basis, whereas an active duty medic, no shade to those guys, they do great work, but the likelihood that they've experienced the same amount of traumatic work is pretty low. So when you're deployed, what kind of medic would you want to have? Somebody who's experienced with sucking chest wounds and tourniquets, or someone who has worked at the aid station every morning and takes your temperature.
No, absolutely. We coming out of the MP world, we say the same thing. Almost every one of our MPs, not all, but almost every one of them, are a police officer on the civilian side. Whereas your MPs on active duty, they might have done some law enforcement. They might have done some of this, but it's kind of fragmented, right? Because they have to do sergeant's time. They have to do this. They have to go to this training. So, when it comes to those hard MP skills, I'm going to take my reserve MP for the most part and put him up against an active duty MP any day of the week. I will tell you, because I had this discussion very recently with a bunch of we had some retired folks come in this weekend and wanted to come visit me, and I visited with them yesterday, and the subject came up that the attitude of I was on active duty, I couldn't stand the reserve, I think is more at the lower levels than it is at the leadership, because I had the exact same attitude. I was on active duty during Desert Storm. And oh, by the way, in the 5th Infantry Division, Fort Polk, Louisiana. So if you go back and look at Desert Storm and some of the call-ups during Desert Storm, you can read about why some of my attitude was. But once you get to some of the higher ranks, you start seeing and you start understanding a little more about unit capabilities and what the units bring to the fight, as opposed to, say, one individual, right? That kind of makes you think that, oh, that one individual, so everybody in the reserve is messed up that way, right? And you're absolutely right about the benefits to being in the reserve. You get to, do what you want as a civilian, and then still get to, I shouldn't use the words play Army, but that's kind of what my husband says. So I'll go ahead and use that. I get to, play Army, and then, but still be a civilian too. So
I say the same thing and play Army, but I mean, in reality, I get the pleasure of being on both sides. Because I've loved serving, and at the same time, I love the freedom that comes along with being a civilian and the experiences that I get on the outside of that, and being able to use both to benefit both worlds.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you, when it comes to when we go on mission, and I know I see it a lot more in the last, I don't know, 5 to 8 years or so. And it's been First Sergeant Sawyer's big mission too, is whenever we go on mission, we want to send up troops that are more than capable of doing the job and represent the Army Reserves and the 95th and the Army Reserve Drill Sergeant program to the best of its ability. So like, as I'm sure you've heard, if you've ever spoken with him, and I know you have, and I'm sure he's mentioned it, right? When he was at Fort Leonard Wood for those 2 years, he, a stellar performer, right? Went from being the reserve drill sergeant new guy to acting first sergeant in his second year, had the highest PT score in the brigade, was extremely proud of that, still is extremely proud of that. And that's kind of the mentality that like and it's funny about him is that I remember before he ever picked up troops, we were talking and he said, "Man, I'm nervous. I've never done this before. I don't know if I'm capable." And I was like, I have known you for, at this point, probably a year. He did stellar in school, and he had this mentality that like, I just don't know if I'm ready. So he studied. He went to work. And he made sure that he knew his job inside and out. And that's one of the benefits of working with somebody like him, is because it makes you want to do that too. And as a reservist, I think it's an extra layer of difficulty.
So it's kind of like being a woman, right?
Right. Yeah.
You have to do better than the active duty guy in order to prove yourself.
Right.
Right. Welcome
Absolutely,
to
man.
my world.
I mean, yeah, and that's really the truth of it, because you don't want to go up there and be messed up. You
That's right.
don't. And
That's right. And again, back to that perception thing, right? An active duty person can get by with this, that if you did it, oh, look at that reserve soldier, And can I just say one thing? And this was tried several years ago, and it's obviously still in the lexicon, but if we could get everybody to quit saying reservist, right? Because that in a way is kind of a pejorative term, damn reservists, right? Instead, reserve soldier is just a reserve soldier as opposed to active duty soldier. But anyway, the bottom line is, you and I both know that yes, there may be things that an active duty soldier could get by with, that they would say damn reservist if we did it. And so, as a reserve officer, sometimes I feel like, and so I have that double layer, female and reserve, that I have to make sure I am just, almost perfect, so that there's nothing derogatory that they can say. So yeah, welcome to my world.
Well, and like you said, like your world is made more difficult because you are also a reservist as well. But
yep.
I will say, like, my experience in the 95th has been for the most part great. Like everywhere that I've gone and interacted, I'll tell you, doing that, the USARC Best Warrior and the 95th Best Warrior as cadre, and getting to interact with all the troops from across the 95th and across the Army Reserves, and seeing the level of professionalism and just the technical and tactical proficiency that a lot of these troops that they bring to the table, on top of managing their civilian lives. That's pretty astounding. It really is. I mean, Corporal Benedict, for example, he went all the way as far as he could. Drill Sergeant Latham, I mean, these guys are out there showing that, like, hey, the Army Reserves, we're an actual force too. And this isn't all to say, and I know it kind of sounds like we're bashing on active duty. We're not.
No, I mean, not at all. It just, it is what it is. And by the way, that Benedict got promoted by Lieutenant General Daniels to sergeant.
And I
like
called him corporal.
An on-the-spot promotion by the 3-star general.
That is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember seeing that post now. Yeah.
Yeah. It is really awesome.
Yeah. Sorry about that, Sergeant Benedict. But yeah. But no, it is one of those things that I'm super proud of, having served in the 95th, and that we really do an amazing job. And it is one of those things where, like, when you were a younger soldier, and you would listen to higher ranking people talk about, like, this has been the best unit ever, blah blah blah, we outperform everybody. and you know, the lower troops on the ground, like, we don't have a way to track those metrics. Like, we don't have a way to like prove it. And I mean, I'm not going to say, hey, prove it, but like, I've been in the 95th for a while, and I've seen how the 95th performs at various levels, and our drill sergeants really are like amongst the best in the Army.
Absolutely. Within the well, since I've been in command, so at least within the past 2 years, one of our drill sergeants at Fort Leonard Wood was drill sergeant of the cycle, not reserve drill sergeant, not drill sergeant of the cycle. You know, so that shows you that they're not using any differentiation. And ironically enough, at Fort Leonard Wood, we actually do keep our patch on. So there is some differentiation going on at Fort Leonard Wood in terms of, you know, branding ourselves, but yet at the same time, you know, trying to be, you know, part of them, right? But yeah, he was drill sergeant, and I apologize, I can't remember who it was, but bottom line, we had a drill sergeant of the cycle at Fort Leonard Wood. So, you know, we absolutely do the same job, and generally we get acknowledged as such.
Yeah, I agree. So, and on that, like this last year, I was part of the continuity, so I did a full cycle, crossing over into the fiscal year at Leonard Wood, and yeah, we do keep the 95th patch on, and I actually love that, because if the troops, they notice everything, and they ask questions, and they want to know why there's a 9 on my shoulder, and that's actually a 95th, and they want to know what the 95th is. And I've always been transparent as a reserve drill sergeant. I've always been transparent about me being in the reserves, and the reason I do that is because I want the troops to know that that's what I am. I don't want to lie to them in any way, and I want them to you know, see or pick up on any differences that they may pick up on between the reserve drill sergeants and the active component. And additionally, the reserve and National Guard troops in the formation, they need somebody to look to when they have questions about the reserves.
Yep,
that active duty just
absolutely.
can't answer.
Right.
And
so I mean, and we all know that the best way to recruit is to tell our stories, right? And to have a story, and to be a walking story. So you know, that's absolutely why, you know, branding is important. At the same time, I understand why, you know, for example, Fort Sill keeps it all the same. I get it. And I'll be honest, as the division commander, I could make a directive one way or the other, and I choose not to, because I feel like it's brigade's missions and not mine. But you know, and I'll be honest, I don't know which way I like better, right? I can see both sides of the whole, you know, patching thing. So
personally, I like wearing the 95th. I mean,
right.
that's who I'm with. I understand that while I'm there. So I mobilized to Fort Sill in 2009, and we wore the 434 patch. But
So
I'm a fan of it.
Are you aware of how much I like the patch?
You know, I was going to ask at some point, ma'am, how much do you like the 95th, ma'am?
I got it tattooed on my arm.
Yeah.
I did.
With your call sign?
With my call sign, Iron Man 6, because as I tell people all the time, I'm very, very proud of being the first female commanding general of this division. I really am. But I'm also very, very proud to be Iron Man 6. So.
And there it is, folks.
And there it is.
If you're not watching the YouTube video, the general just whipped her shirt off.
Jesus.
That is one way of putting that.
I mean, from a civilian level, and she's showing us her beautiful tattoo. Very proud.
We can't see it, Terry, because you're talking.
Well, there it is. You know, there it is. So I don't try so much.
Anyway, so yes, I had it tattooed. So my next one is I'm going to get the flag on here, right? So I'll have a complete uniform.
Nice.
So,
that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing that, and oh geez, when was that?
On National Tattoo Day.
Wait, there's a day for that, ma'am? I should know this because
apparently.
I have tattoos. You would think I would know that.
Yes.
I have it on the calendar.
I have several more. That's the only one that sort of shows in a uniform, but only in the short sleeve shirt. So
yeah. Well, and so So today you were out doing land nav, and so that's one of the other things that I really enjoy about you is whenever we have training events, you'll actually come out and participate.
So if I'm here at my headquarters, because I belong to a company, right? As far as I know, every person in the military belongs to a company. Or a battery, right? Or a detachment. They have a commander. So every general has a commander. So I have a company commander, and she produces a training schedule. I mean, granted, I approve it, but still she produces a training schedule. I'm a soldier. I have to participate in training, and I should participate in training. I did leave a commo class early to come here because there was no way I was going to get everything done. But yes, I did land nav this morning. Although I should clarify that I actually just maybe hiked more than I navigated. Because we were, so it was this. I mean, up and down. I was so angry at the end that I didn't set my watch on at least a walk, my Garmin on a walk, so I could see what my elevation profile was. But I will say I had over 10,000 steps by the time we were done. So it was a pretty long hike, but we can't honestly say I did any navigating because I never ran the map or the compass. Just saying.
The Sergeant Major took over that job for you?
Sergeant Major and Sergeant Barnett are enlisted assistant there. So yeah.
But yeah, no, I was just gonna mean, like, I don't know, that's just something that I've really enjoyed about having you as the division commander, because when you do come out to events, like, you'll participate, like, and you're not afraid to do that. And it's like you said, like, regardless of where you are in your career in the Army, you're a soldier first. Whether you're the youngest private serving or, you know, the 4-star, right? And on that note, what's next, ma'am? Are you staying in the 95th forever?
Yeah,
no.
added to her arms. It's forever.
Well, I hope when I leave, I get the inducted into the lifetime 95th division. You know, there is a certificate for that. Hopefully they'll give that to me, right? Change of command is tentatively scheduled for July. We do not know who's replacing me at this point, and we do not know what's happening with me.
I didn't know that you were leaving that soon. I'm pretty mad about it.
So I was supposed to left in January. It's a 2-year tenure.
Jeez. Okay.
I've been here 2 years.
Actually, it kind of
thinks that happens because it's sometimes right when you really get your hands into something, right when you really get these projects developed, now you have to leave and hand it off to somebody who I'm sure is capable. But
absolutely. And it's sad for us too, right? Because we get things going, or we've you know, like we're already planning best warrior competition for next year, right? In the symposium. And I finally told Sergeant Major, I said, look, I just can't keep fumbling around. Well, we're not going to be here, but I said, we're just going to talk as if it is us, because there are some things that you can't wait to plan, right? Huge events like a best warrior competition and symposium, we can't wait. So we have to drive on, and to quit talking all awkward, we finally just talked as if it was going to be us, even though we know it's not going to be us. But it was getting awkward trying to go third person for anyway. It was, yeah. So yeah, hopefully I've left my stamp, or will have left my stamp on this division, and but I know it'll be in capable hands, whoever takes over next, and they'll do the same thing, right? I mean, everybody puts their stamp on an organization, and you just always hope that, you know, everybody makes it a little bit better.
Right. No, I agree. I feel like I've had pretty good fortune of having a ton of great leaders in my time in the Army, especially in the reserves, though, right? I mean, my last battalion commander, Colonel Cole, I mean, guy was amazing. Genuinely cared. Sergeant Major Carr genuinely cared about the troops and the job. and really appreciated having them around. And like I said, First Sergeant Sawyer and Captain Schneider, like just great people. Like, and I'm actually really sad that like Captain Schneider's leaving too.
Right.
But you know, that's just how it goes in the Army.
That's right. Yep.
And you know, it's kind of a bittersweet thing, right? Because if you have somebody who stays in a position for a while, eventually complacency can kick in, and then you know your metrics start to slide, and you know the unit cohesion may fall apart. You bring in new people, and you know you get fresh ideas, you get fresh innovation, can take the unit in a completely different direction. Sometimes that can be good, sometimes that can be bad, and that's just kind of how it goes. But
Right.
it's all a learning experience for you know all involved, right? Because if you see a bad example, well, now I know what to avoid when I get to
Oh,
this point.
absolutely.
But yeah,
Yeah, and funny, you were talking about metrics. Did you read the article, recent article about metrics?
I don't think so, ma'am. I'm sorry.
So, General Daniels, and rightfully so, is trying to make sure that we all focus on readiness instead of metrics, right? And making sure we do training, good Army training, because we are soldiers. We shouldn't be spending all of our battle assemblies doing administrative work, right? And I get it, absolutely. But there was an article recently that she wrote. No, was it the one she wrote? No, it's not the one. It's somebody was reporting on her and the culture she's trying to change. She wrote an article about culture and changing culture. They wrote an article about the changes she's trying to make. And they quoted a drill sergeant battalion commander. Didn't say what division. And I can't remember if the same person made this quote, but bottom line, the battalion commanders that they were quoting were fussing because their division commanders and their brigade commanders were still focusing on metrics. And it went so far as to say the effing generals should be fired. And I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? And so you've brought up metrics a couple of times. So I want to touch on that for just a second, because I feel like I don't chase numbers, right? Like I don't ask, I mean, obviously I don't ask First Sergeant Sawyer anyway, because, you know, levels of chain, but still, I don't ask Colonel Herbst how many people have completed the PHA, right? He may report that to me, but what I'm hoping is he knows who is behind that number, right? Because we're not chasing numbers so much as we're hoping we're taking care of soldiers. Because if a soldier doesn't get a PHA and then he later, say, has a heart attack in the middle of the ACFT, what questions are going to be asked? And could that PHA maybe have caught, you know, some kind of abnormal heart arrhythmia, right? Or he turned 40 and got the over 40 physical and discovered, you know, hey, we start breaking down. And so anyway, it's funny because you mentioned metrics and kind of triggers in my head. And it's one of the things that I keep preaching at the YTBs is the fact that I'm not chasing numbers, and I hope they're not chasing numbers. What I hope we're doing is looking at the individual soldiers and what do they need to be ready, right? Because that's our job as a soldier, is to always be ready to go off to war, whatever, or to go off to whatever we're called to do, right? In our case, we're called to, you know, go do a mission at Fort Leonard Wood or Fort Sill. And can you do that if you're not ready? And if you, and can you do that if your first sergeant hasn't made sure you're ready, right? So anyway, I just my plug there.
No, I can agree with that. And I think kind of like how you said, the term reservist should be replaced with reserve soldier. To say metrics, at least from how I'm understanding it, is a matter of readiness. And so
I would agree, but the person who wanted to have me fired, right, is conflating metrics and readiness. So when I ask, are you ready? You know, I hope that person understands that that doesn't mean I'm asking, you know, for all the numbers. I just want to make sure that, you know, that you're ready, that, you know, that you're physically fit, that you know, that you're mentally fit, that you've gotten your PME. And how can I make sure that you are ready and that you, and that I'm, and taking care of you, right? I'm taking care of you to make sure you go and get your physical and that you get your dental done, because those are health considerations, right? So anyway, yeah.
Well, and in terms of readiness, being that we are a training division, right? So I for us, for example, we're our company, we're a satellite, and we're down there by Fort Chaffee. And so we have the benefit of being right next to Fort Chaffee with all the amenities that they have in regards to training. And I've heard troops, some of my candidates mention, why are we doing this? We're supposed to be drill sergeants. And I explained to them, well, how can you teach a trainee to do this when you haven't even done it yourself? One, and two, ideally, and I heard you say this at Fort Leonard Wood last year, ideally, you're not going to be in this unit for a
That's
long
right.
time. You're going to be here for 3-4 years and hopefully take what you've learned here to the rest of the Army.
Absolutely. And you don't want to be the bozo who doesn't know how to put the SINGARs together. That would have been me a few minutes ago. But you know, and that's what my class was common. We had to put SINGARs together and communicate, you know, over SINGARs. But yeah, absolutely. Because you're not, I mean, drill sergeants aren't always going to be in this unit. We hope they're not always in this unit, right? Because a drill sergeant is a engineer or an MP or a medic or a logistician first. A drill sergeant is a broadening assignment that we're very thankful that y'all wanted to do, that they wanted to do. And, you know, all these different MOSs come together to produce these great soldiers who train civilians, recruits to become a soldier. But then it's time for them to go back to being soldiers in the engineering world or the MP world, or, you know, or wherever they come from.
Yeah. No, 100% agree. And I say that having been in this division for a very long time, but I didn't want to leave.
I did notice that, but I wasn't going to call you out on it. So.
Well, and so that was the thing. I had the 11 Bravo MOS, and there's not a lot of places for me to go in the reserves.
True.
And then I did ultimately reclass to 92 Yankee and 31 Bravo, but I'm looking at retirement now. So, I you know, in my personal life, I feel like I would like to move on to other things. I don't want to do anything. I love being a drill.
So here's what I tell soldiers like that. And in the reserve, we can't make you go to another unit. It's funny because USARC likes to try. They put out these little tenure policy letters, right? That you're only going to be a drill sergeant for 4 years or whatever. But we can't make you go. And as long as you accept the consequences of those decisions, and by consequences, we mean you may have stifled your promotion ability, and, you know, which eventually could lead you to have to retire, maybe before you wanted to retire, those types of things. But I say that as long as you still stay up on your Army skills, right? Because you even mentioned it, that sometimes complacency and stagnant, you know, so as long as that doesn't occur, as long as you keep yourself not just ready, but keep yourself up to date so that you're not complacent and not stagnant. And then as long as you're willing to accept personally the consequences of the decision, then stay a drill sergeant for as long as you want to stay, right? It might not be the best decision for you professionally, but you've made that decision. I had that discussion just today with Sergeant Barnett. You know, he's been in the command group at division for a long, long time. It's probably not the wisest decision from a you know, professional standpoint. As long as he understands what he's possibly done to his career, that's his call to make.
Yeah. No, and I accepted that because like I love being a drill sergeant. It's the most rewarding job I've ever done.
Yeah, then stay being a drill sergeant. I would just ask that you stay up to date, not become complacent or stagnant, right?
Well, and that was part of my decision to retire. So last year when I went on that cycle, my experience in the Army is outdated. As far as what I can give to these troops, because I'm working with drill sergeants who are closer in age and in time and service to the troops they're training than I am. And so what I felt like what I was giving them was old, outdated information. I deployed to Iraq in 2004 and they want to know about combat. Well, I can tell them about combat in 2004, but a lot has changed since then. And now GWAT's over. And so that was kind of a big part of it. And so, like I said, I didn't want to do anything else in the Army. I love being a drill, and so that was my decision.
But there are ways to still to stay relevant, right? There's ways to, besides PME, there's different ways of getting professional development to keep yourself up to date. You're right, though. Our experiences, I deployed in 05, 06 and during the height of the surge. So, my experiences are, I won't say not valid, right? I mean, they're valid, and I won't even say they're not relevant. They're relevant, but it is not the same as, someone who has deployed much more recently. So, yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Well, ma'am, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I know you're at Battle Assembly right now, and they might want you to finish up that commo class. I don't know.
No, I think they don't. Every now and then they're glad to get rid of me, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, no, ma'am, no, absolutely not. We have never said that ever. However, with that being said, I don't know if you know this, but we have a battalion battle assembly coming up in April down at Fort Chaffee.
Yeah, I think I looked at those dates. What were those dates?
3rd, 4th, 5th, and no, wait, 4, 5, 6, and oh my gosh, 5. I think it's 4 days.
Oh
To
Lord.
the 8th. Oh, it's 5, 6, 7, 8 April. Yeah, sorry.
Are you serious? That's Easter.
That's what we said, ma'am. So the last, it's a 4-day battle assembly ending on Saturday. So
Oh, gotcha. Okay. It's
Yeah.
kind of, in February, I ended my symposium on a Saturday. Do you know why?
why is that, ma'am?
I was going to get everybody home in time for the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. See,
Is
and
that's the other non-traditional, it's the other non-traditional holiday that you have to observe in the Army Reserve, right? Super Bowl, Mother's Day, and I also do Father's Day. Although when I first came up in the unit, in the Army Reserve, a lot of units would schedule during Father's Day. It's like, oh, it's not as important as Mother's Day, and I'm like, really? What? So yeah, I make sure that when I'm reviewing my HHC commander's battle assembly schedule for the year, I don't allow her to schedule during Super Bowl, which really restricts February because you've also got President's Day and Mother's Day. So I'm actually surprised they scheduled anything for Easter weekend period, but at least you're getting home in time for Easter. So
right. Yeah, and every year they always have, and it's been my biggest pet peeve. They always have battle assembly on my birthday in September. It's pretty rude. So,
yeah, so I've almost always missed my birthday too, because my birthday's the third weekend in April, and so avoiding things like spring break, Easter, things like that. So my birthday gets hit quite a bit.
Well, that's perfect. If you RSC with us in April, then you don't have to worry about that. It's too easy.
Hey, ma'am, what about retention?
Hey, retention is so important. Actually, we do pretty good at retention, but if we don't, we actually do. But if we don't start doing a better job of providing meaningful battle assemblies, we're not going to keep soldiers. And can you blame them? And I tell that to my battalion commanders all the time, because we're right in the middle of YTB season right now. And so I'm going around telling them, these young soldiers, if they come to battle assembly weekend and twiddle their thumbs, they're getting paid really good money to twiddle their thumbs. But most of them would rather have no pay and be at home than to sit there and get paid and twiddle their thumbs. So can you edit all that?
Oh yeah, no. No, and I that's 100% agree. And like that's kind of what I was getting at with us being right next to Chaffee, is like we've got access to what they have there. And it's not everything, but it's enough that we have a full ACFT field. We can go do IED defeat lanes, we can go to the range, we can play airsoft. And we can do that at a drop of a hat, because First Sergeant Sawyer has all those people on speed dial, and
Yeah,
he's on Chaffee.
Well, and it's the same thing for us here at SIL, right? We've got whatever that training area we went out to today for the land nav. That wasn't just a made up land nav course that you've probably seen before at some reserve units. It's an actual land nav course. It was a really long nav. I mean, one of our points was 13 clicks away. So
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, it was long. Anyway, yeah, so we, and we've got ranges here and things like that. So I know it's more difficult for those units that are, standalone units that have to travel a distance to train. It takes, some ingenuity, some initiative. So yeah, those of us who are around some training areas, it's definitely more fortunate. So
Yeah, I mean, even if we don't have access to something on Chaffee, we still find a way to go do something.
right.
We used to, like, long before we would go to Chaffee to do anything, we would go outside in the parking lot, and I mean, we would do DNC, or we would practice NBC, like CBurn stuff. We used to have masks and like decon kits, so we would do stuff like that. But I think people tend to forget that in the Army, like, our job, regardless of your MOS and your duty position, your ASIs, we're soldiers across the board, and our range of knowledge should be pretty vast. There's a lot of things that we can train on in the Army, whether
Absolutely.
it's tactics or sharp, or whatever. Like, all of these things are mandatory things, and the things that we need to know, because when, again, especially for us, when we get in front of troops, they have every question under the sun and then some. And
Right.
if we don't have an appropriate answer, then we're kind of failing them.
Right. Yep. You know, talking about equipment and where you're training, things like that. I have a reading program that I require all E8s and above to participate. All you need is a Kindle or an audio book or a physical book. They still have those. So, there are ways to be creative. I went to a unit in the state of Washington not too long ago, and well, not too long ago. It was actually September, because it was the beginning of football season, because I listened to a football game while I was ruck marching with them. We were doing, actually not ruck marching, because it was the Luxembourg, so ruck wasn't involved. But they were going to do the obstacle course the next day, and they're on an Air Force base, and the unit that is tenant there ripped the obstacle course away from them, so they couldn't use it. So they got a bouncy house. Have you ever seen a bouncy house obstacle course?
I've seen the posts. It is
That's called
ridiculous.
getting creative, right?
Yeah.
Gotta overcome.
Well, hey, and your book reading thing, have you done? And I'm asking about this book specifically because so Tyree and I, when we were on active duty, we served with the guy Tony Uribe, and he PCS'd from 126 Infantry to this unit. I can't remember the unit's name now. And then they went to Iraq, and that's where the whole story of Black Hearts.
That was the first book I assigned.
Yeah, Black Hearts. So Tony Uribe, he's one of the main characters in the book. He was the sergeant in charge of the guy who was guilty of doing all the massacre.
Okay.
And we actually recorded with him in our first, was that season 1, Tyree? 2?
No, season 2.
Yeah. And so we got to hear his side of it, and crazy story. Crazy story. I don't know. It like, I know, like, Tyree, you were on the edge of your seat. I was on the edge of my seat. Like, I couldn't believe that he had gone through the things that he had gone through there, and then after the fact.
Right.
But
it didn't stop coming for him for a minute.
Yeah. But that's what I didn't know if that was one of the books, and you said it was the first book.
First book I assigned, because when I found out I was coming here, because I knew wherever I went, I was going to have a reading program. That's me, right? I mean, I'm an English teacher. It's just, that's part of who I am. I've also been fortunate that almost every unit I've ever been in from the time I was lieutenant on active duty had a reading program, fairly active reading program. And so I started thinking that, okay, I'm going to a drill sergeant unit. What kinds of books, or what books should I assign? Well, the first thing that pops into my mind is discipline, right? And good order and discipline. And I had already read Black Hearts. And so I decided that was going to be the first book I assigned. Now, before I decided on the reading program, I reached out to who my sergeant major was at the time, CSM Potts. And I said, look, this is what I'm planning. do you want NCOs involved? And if so, what rank? And so, because I was not going to dictate this to NCOs without, my sergeant major's concurrent support, right? And so that's when he and I decided, or he decided E8s and above would be where it went. And I told him what book I had decided, and he said, well, all of my CSMs have already read it because they were required to read it for some CSM symposium. So it was only the officers. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong, some of the officers had even read it, but the NCOs, the senior NCOs, had already read it in this division. And then right about the time I had made the assignment, and right about the time I was coming over here, the Fort Hood report came out. And so I also made the Fort Hood report required reading for this unit. And y'all know what I'm talking about with the Fort Hood report.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, there's a couple things that are coming to mind, but like what specifically, ma'am?
It came about after the Specialist Guillen, the female that was killed at Fort Hood, directly related to sharp issues. And anyway, that report came out, so I assigned that report because I felt like that was worthwhile for leaders to read. And of course, I'm very cognizant of the recommendations in there and make sure that, that we try as much as we can to, I won't say as much as we can. We do everything we can in this unit to make sure that we, have a culture that does not allow that to thrive, right? Our current book, if I can put a plug in, our current book is on ethics, actually, ethics and moral leadership, because it was something that the chaplain taught a couple of months ago, and I decided let's do a reading on that. So I actually assigned a book, and don't ask me the title, I forgot, and I don't have my phone right here. And I'll tell you about phones in a minute, but gosh, we're just getting right back into the podcast, right? I mean, did we stop and now we're starting again? Anyway, I assigned a book but told everybody that all they had to do is read one essay out of it, because it's like a book of 20 essays on moral leadership. And then I am have them reading the AR, the DA PAM that's actually called ethical leadership or moral leadership. And then I assign 2 movies, and they can pick one of the 2 movies: Fury, the one with Brad Pitt, and Kill Team, the 2019 movie from about Afghanistan that has to do with morality. So that's the current stuff, is moral leadership. So a movie and an essay.
Oh, I'm curious to know what that book is. I'll ask
I think the title is Moral Leadership, something, but I don't have my phone in front of me because did y'all see the video where I no longer allow phones in the classroom? Actually, it's over there on my desk, but yeah, no phones or electronics in a classroom anymore, anywhere in the 95th Division if I'm involved. So YTBs, any kind of conference that I'm involved in, no electronics, because people get all on their phones and not paying attention to the briefers or the instructors, and it's just the wrong way to be.
I had read that like when we go to we have a class and there's PowerPoints and people take pictures of the PowerPoint and they'll refer to it later, that's actually bad for you, right? Because you're not actually like the act of writing something down commits it more to memory, so later on when you have better recall of it, as opposed to just taking a picture and I'll refer to it later, and nobody ever does,
right? No, exactly, they don't. So
I tried it once. I don't remember what school I was at, but I tried it and I was like, well, I did it at MFT, and I actually referred back to those because MFT is like hands down my favorite school that I've been to in the Army.
Nice.
But I still refer back to those slides, and I eventually put them in handwritten notes, and I still refer back to that. But I did it once in a class, and I don't remember what it was, and I was like, I'm going to refer back to these later, and I never did. And then I was like, what was that thing that was in the slide? And after that I just started writing everything down.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
you also don't engage as much when all you do is take a picture, because you think you've got it, so why even think about it? Why even listen anymore, right?
Absolutely. Well, Tyree,
are we going to end again?
Yeah. Well, like I said, we typically do like an AAR, so we'll just include that in this. So original ending, that will air on March 27th.
Yeah.
That Monday morning. All of the audio posts at 1:26 a.m. Pacific time, and the YouTube posts at 1:26 Central. That's
So
then,
YouTube with the Brady Bunch squares and everything.
No, it's weird.
Taking off my shirt.
No. What happens is every time this yellow box is on, you're going to be on screen. So
Right.
right now I'm talking. Now you're talking. It'll bounce around. So it's no
Gotcha.
continuous 3 different screens. It's a little annoying. So
yeah. And we would love to share that on our social media pages too and push that out if that's all right.
Yeah, for sure, sure.
I'm ready. Shoot us a link and we would love to push that out.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I guess it'd be that Monday morning whenever they post. I can text them to you, sir. And
Perfect.
I might need a reminder because that's a week from now, and I probably won't remember tomorrow.
That's
we
okay.
won't have slept since then.
Yeah, we won't forget to remind you though. So
But yeah, again, ma'am, I really appreciate you taking the time. I really do.
so do you lift heavy? Do you CrossFit or do you just lift?
Oh God, no, I don't CrossFit at all. I need, so I've actually, and I was thinking about that this morning, as I was sitting there eating breakfast for pizza. I'm sorry, pizza for breakfast. I was like, I should start doing something. So in transporting these veterans around, I have, it's been a great pleasure speaking with a lot of them. But it's also made me realize that, so a lot of them are in a wheelchair and they're in their 60s, early 70s, and they're broken down. And a lot of them, they didn't take care of themselves better. And I'm 40 and I feel pain everywhere. My trainees that last cycle, they had a couple quotes that they knew from me, and one of them is existence is pain. It's a thing from Rick and Morty, but
Which means my son knows it.
but because they would complain like, drills aren't, I'm so sore, drills aren't this, drills aren't that. I'm like, I wake up every morning in pain and I'm still here, so let's go. And I believe in transparency with the trainees. If they know that I'm feeling what they're feeling, then they're more likely to try to outperform me, and that's what I like. But so it's kind of made me wonder. It's like, the way I have been lifting, I do a lot of strength training, so I try to get bigger lifts, but that is not working out for my joints, my kinetic chain, my back. A lot of things are out of whack. And I can only go to the chiropractor so much and get things readjusted, realigned. So I have been looking at other methods of exercise. I hate running, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to pick up swimming. I'm not a very good swimmer, but I'm going to start doing that. I go to FAC.
You're going to do a triathlon.
I say, excuse me, ma'am.
You've got the bike and the running already in your mind. You just said that. So
yeah, and it's funny. I was just thinking I need to take my bike up to Lewis and Clark and get it serviced.
There you go. Triathlon is in your future. I see it. See, I'm the exact opposite. So I'm a runner, love to run. I'm slow, but I run. And so my brain tells me every now and then, you really should want to do a triathlon. And then the correct side of my brain says, what the hell? You don't want to swim. You don't want to bike. Why is this even floating in your brain? So it goes out of my brain the minute it comes in. So all I want to do is run, although I do enjoy CrossFit. Because it's what helped me pass the ACFT. I started doing CrossFit 3 years ago because I knew I'd have to do something. I'd never done anything like that.
Well, the joke, MFT was, the ACFT was created by a lieutenant that failed out of selection.
Gotcha. Okay.
A CrossFitter, but yeah, because
Right.
it is closely related. I love the ACFT personally. I dreaded the APFT.
So speaking of, what does the rumor have to say about ACFT? So, the timing of the ACFT. So there's a Facebook page on Facebook, and I don't remember the exact name of it, but bottom line, it's Army Women and ACFT. There's only women on this page. And there's a lot of women who truly believe that the ACFT was created to keep more women out of combat arms because the timing was about the same. Because think about when they first started talking about integrating combat arms, all the old curmudgeons all the old curmudgeons, well, as long as they meet the standard, I mean, that's what they would always say, right? So then what was the standard? What was the standard to be an infantry before 2016? It was an ASVAB score, it was a GT score, and a pulleys. That was it. So why couldn't women meet that standard, right? They could, of course, but it was law. So they, undid the law. And now this whole, well, as long as they meet the standard. Well, of course they meet the standard. The only standard to be an infantry guy or to be in any MOS was a pulley score and a GT score. So then they came up with the OPAT, which, you take enlistment to, but they had to create that first. But the timing of the ACFT is very suspicious to a lot of people because, as you know, the initial ACFT tests, were very difficult, and there were a lot of women not passing. I still think, I may be wrong, but I'm not sure that we have had a woman yet make 600 on the old score.
No, I can see that for sure. I've always said, even before they went to the gender specific grading, that it was impossible for a woman to if she can deadlift the 340, there's no way she's maxing that run. If she can max that run, there's no way she's deadlifting 340.
That's right. And oh, by the way, if she's deadlifting 340, she's not making height weight.
Right. I am.
Did part, right?
That change that just came out. Yeah,
it did change. But again, it goes back to if she's deadlifting 340, she's probably not passing the run, right? So they made some changes. The other thing I would tell you, and I've had this discussion with more than one person, if they would have kept the ACFT pass fail, no points, just pass fail, that is gender neutral. But the minute you start putting points on it, it's not gender neutral anymore. Now it's gender biased. Because if I have to do the same amount to get 70 points that you have to do, what is neutral about that? Look at your arms compared to mine, right? What is neutral about that? So now I do agree with the MOS standards, right? But again, age standards and rank, because there was a rank standard. Because yes, as an MPE5 is going to be doing the same thing whether they're a male or female, right? An E5 MP, doesn't matter if they're male or female, they're going to be doing the same thing. But as a Brigadier General MP, I am not going to be doing the same thing that an E5 MP is going to be doing, right? So I'm not saying they're going to go back and redo any of this, but I mean, I think they've made a lot of improvement. But again, when you add those numbers to it, that doesn't make it gender biased. That actually makes it gender neutral. If you want true gender neutral, make it pass fail. Because if we're talking combat, we're talking life or death. It's pass or fail. There ain't no in between there, right?
Yeah.
So, but I will say that I went from on the new standard, I went from making 368. I passed by 8 measly points to, I think it was taking that exact test, and it became like 472 points. I will also tell you, I had my last IG female, 4'10", I think. She's not even as tall as the deadlift bars. So when she's trying to deadlift, no lie, her arms were almost straight out. How do you deadlift when your arms are straight out, right? Now, supposedly there's different bars, but a lot of us don't have those bars. But how do you deadlift when your arms are out here?
I have a ton of complaints. Well, not a ton, but there are a few. Like the standing power throw, for example. A lot of us are not used to that. We're not used to that motion, and so now we're potentially looking at rotator cuff tears, bicep separation. Matter of fact, First Sergeant Sawyer went through that just recently.
Oh wow!
And he just had a second surgery to repair all of that stuff. And then, like you said, on the deadlift, so with her, for example, if she's got to reach further out here to lift that bar, regardless of how much weight is on there, the amount of strain that someone is feeling in their shoulder and in their traps, their rhomboids, everything that's involved in that, it's not good. That's whereas for me, like I'm 6'2". I mean, those handles are right next, like where they're supposed to be for me. Like that bar is designed for me. It's not designed for somebody shorter.
But it's also not designed for somebody almost 7 feet tall. I don't remember where I was, but somebody almost 7 feet tall, they had difficulty getting the bar over their knees, right? Because when they squatted down to pick up the bar, their knees stuck out so much that the motion was also difficult. So, yeah, but you made a comment that I think you made the comment that it's fun, that you like the test a lot more. And I think, didn't you say that?
I did. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love the test now that they've made some of the, what I think are fair adjustments to it. Like, for example, you're a drill sergeant, maybe you can answer this. Why the hell, when we're doing the APFT, do we turn around and put our backs to our soldiers so that we're not watching them? I mean, that just seems so cold-blooded, right? And nobody can answer that. I don't even think you can. I was kind of being rhetorical on that, because nobody knows. It's just because we always did it that way, right? But the ACFT is so much fun because we're cheering everybody on. If you've ever been in a CrossFit gym, right? Everybody's cheering each other. And that's kind of the way the test is. And I like it. I was a hater at first, very much a hater at first, and not necessarily a conspiracy theorist like some people are. But I have come around. I like it. It helps that I'm now trained for it, but I had to do that on my own by, joining a CrossFit gym. And a lot of, reserve soldiers don't have that opportunity. So that's a whole other story.
When I was at, so First Sergeant Sawyer and I, we went to MFT together. And one thing they talked about at that school was, so the APFT trained, so it's push-ups and it's sit-ups and a 2-mile run, right? There's no posterior chain being trained at all, right? And when you think about like posture, walking, running, rucking, lifting, which is a lot of what we do in the Army, all of that stuff includes your posterior chain. So we're not working it. And so we get a lot of people with this rounded effect here, lower cross syndrome, upper cross syndrome, bad back problems, low back problems. And you look at like how the ACFT prepares somebody for those things. It is so much better. But again, they need to have a better thing for deadlift. Because again, that bar is not built for everybody. The standing power throw, honestly, I don't really see the point, because when are you going to launch a 10-pound anything overhead?
Yeah.
And I can see how it relates to other things that we do. But
and one of the things I will say that I thought that they did a pretty good job of was relating each of the events to a combat thing.
Right on. Well, ma'am, again, thank you for being on. We don't want to take any more of your time, and the division needs you. And but yeah, no, really appreciate you taking the time to be on with us today and speak with us. It's been a pleasure to be able to speak with you and ask you all the questions, but yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Tyree, you have anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on. And we'll go ahead and close this out, right?
So if I could, I'm going to, kind of repeat what General Daniels says at the end of all of her broadcasts about, people first, ready now, shaping tomorrow, Iron Man 6 out.
And there it is. So everyone, thank you for listening to Before I Forget. Please like, listen, share, subscribe, and watch.